Hey, there we go. Hi, everybody. How are you on this Friday? Um, Happy Friday. Happy dry day. It's going to be a beautiful day. It's going to be a beautiful tomorrow. So that is all very good. Let's just hop on. I know we're 10 minutes late. We're going to try to keep this to 15 minutes because it's a fairly big unit again. Still connected to the war, after the war, how we seem to still be involved in conflicts around the world. What we're going to talk about today is the Cold War. When it was called a Cold War because it didn't take place with direct conflict between the two countries. The two countries are the United States and the Soviet Union. We never battled directly, though we were involved in power struggles, um, tension, hostility, um, battles that took place adjacent to us from after the war ended all the way up until 1991. So there was an instrumental leader in the Soviet Union by the name of Nikita Khrushchev who said in 1959 that America has been in existence for 150 years, and this is the level she's reached. We've existed not quite 42 years, and in another 7 years, we're going to be on the same level as America. And when we catch up to you and passing you by, we're going to wave at you. And so then our president in 1965, who was Lyndon Johnson, said, you know what? We're not going to just sit here in a rocking chair with our hands folded and let the communists set up any government in our hemisphere, in the Western hemisphere. So they're flexing. Everybody's flexing, right? So let's go on and talk about how this all began. I'm going to share my screen with you, show you this little um, definition again, which is an era of confrontation and competition within between the United States and the Soviet Union when the threat, now this is a key part, and when the threat of nuclear war created constant world tension. During certain times in our history, we felt that we were very close to nuclear war. In fact, the United States waged a nuclear war on Japan to end the World War II. But when it came to the idea that two superpowers, being the United States and the Soviet Union, could engage in a nuclear war, that scared the whole world. And really, while everybody was flexing, the hope was really that this would never come to pass. So what I want to go through now, it's a PowerPoint presentation. However, um, she has it on she has it on YouTube. So what I'm going to do is read it out loud because there's no sound, but it was a good presentation. So maybe she was new at it. I'm not mad. Her content was good. So I'm going to read as we go through it. Oh, okay. We know that has noise. Wish I could speed it up. Skip ads. There we go. This is not it. Okay, y'all. That's not the lesson. Let's go back. This is not my lesson at all. This is our lesson. Our PowerPoint presentation on the Cold War. So introduction to the Cold War. And we just talked about what that is. So can I close this? Can I close this part? That would be so nice. I tell you what I'm going to do. Here we go. So what is the Cold War? The Cold War is the conflict that existed between the United States and the Soviet Union. Oh, lady, you're going too fast. Between the United States and the Soviet Union. between 1945 and 1991, and it is called cold because the two sides never went to war directly with one another. And this is a 7-minute video. It's a lot of stuff. It's action-packed. We're going to take everything piece by piece as we go over the next few days. So, if the US and the USSR, which we used to call the United Soviet something Republic, I am terrible today. Why do we call it a war? Because many wars were never fought between communists. Many wars were fought between communists who were supported by Russia and the anti-communists supported by the United States. They both competed for power using their political, economic, and military clout throughout the world, and both sides felt their national survival was at stake. But let's talk about the real foundation of wars. I would tell you 9 times out of 10, it is over money. It's over stuff. It's all about money. That is generally the real reason why wars have been waged all over the world. Come along, dear. Okay, I won't stop it because she's just slow. It's very slow. All right, so this is the outline, the significance of the Cold War, the causes of the Cold War, the historical background. And so part 1, why should we study this Cold War? How has it affected U.S. history? It brought the world to the brink of nuclear destruction. It was the direct cause of the U.S. wars in Korea and Vietnam. It led to the moon landing, really, and it is largely responsible for the U.S. debt. We spend more money on military than anyone in the world, and between several of the top countries combined. And it also shaped the post-World War II era, what life was like generally all over the world. Okay. So the US and USSR raced to be ahead of each other in atomic warfare, building thousands of nuclear weapons, even more powerful than what they used in World War II. War in Korea and Vietnam, the US fought 2 wars to contain the spread of communism. The spread of communism was seen as a growth in the power of the USSR. Let me take that back just a tad. Over 100,000 Americans were killed between Korea and Vietnam. We're still fighting. The Soviets and the Americans competed to develop new technology. When the Soviets were the first to launch a satellite, the United States raced to be the first to the moon. And we're still paying. We're still paying this day. If you want to talk about the national debt, how it's into the trillions, we can get it lower, but we're a long way probably from ever eradicating it because we spend so much in defense. The Soviet Union collapsed in 1991. One reason is that it couldn't keep up with the US in defense spending. We have a healthier and stronger economy that can somewhat support it, but we spend more money in defense and war weapons right now than we spend on making bridges and new streets, creating jobs, building schools, creating businesses. We spend a lot of money on our war machine. It's referred to as a machine. We're still paying. That's the crazy part. This is Ronald Reagan and Gorbachev in 1991 that signed the treaty, which, well, shaping the world. Why is there a North Korea and a South Korea? Why is there an East Germany and West Germany? Why did the United States support some dictators and oppose some free elections? The reason is the Cold War. And let's look at Cuba. We'll talk about Cuba, which kind of like the short end of the stick. What caused the Cold War? The United States and Russia fought against a common enemy, Germany. That alliance didn't last very long. What caused the United States and Russia to turn from allies to enemies? Okay, let's dig into this for 1 second. Philosophical differences in how they felt government should operate and people should be able to function within a society. The Soviet Union was communist, totalitarian, and also a dictatorship, where the United States um, practices free enterprise capitalism. We're going to talk about all of this. And it is a republic, whether with a government elected by the people or for the people rather than someone placed there. And you don't have choice whether that person comes or goes, how long they stay, how, you know, how poorly they are ruling. They're there. So World War II conflicts, the Soviets wanted the British and the Americans to open a second front earlier in the war. And then the United States, meantime, was developing an atomic bomb. So after the war, the Soviet Union refused to live up to wartime promises of elections and free elections in Eastern Europe, okay, because they were not a democracy. Um, their person was, they always had dictators. So they weren't about to give people free and fair elections. And so then the US made efforts to resist Soviet expanding. They too were ruled by a dictator who wanted to rule the world. And then, so the Cold War was an era of high tension. I mean, just flexing and threatening and starting wars. And it was a scary time, even if you lived in the United States. Let's keep it moving. Slow, it's slow, it's slow, it's slow. Come on, dear. Cause number one, mistrust. This two nations just did not trust each other. Each felt the other was out to undermine them. When when disagreement arose, both assumed the worst. So the Soviets remembered the attempt by the United States to overthrow the communist government during their civil war. And then the United States felt that Stalin had broken promises about free elections in Europe after the war. So they began to compete for power. So the US and Russia emerged from World War II as the most powerful nations in the world. And you know what? You're either creeping or you're going too slow. Both wanted to create a new world order that would protect their interests. So they had different ideologies. And that's a way of looking at the world or a system of beliefs. Oh, lady, you just. Mm. Often they would disagree on how to create a new world order and protect their own interests. So that created the conflict. The Soviets had a communist dictatorship and opposed capitalism. The Americans had a capitalist democracy, so called. We can talk about some civil rights issues, and opposed communism. But we were held up as the model of democracy after that time. So then, um, next. Why did the United States hate and fear communism? What is communism? Here we go. Let's get some understanding on this. Society as a whole is more and more splitting into two hostile camps: the bourgeoisie, the class of modern capitalists, owners of means of production and employers, and the proletariat. That's the laborer who has no means of production on their own, and they're just reduced to selling their labor. He's saying that the worker is almost like a slave in order to live. So this is what Karl Marx, who was a communist, felt about society, that the ruling class treats the worker like a slave. And he ain't wrong. He's not wrong there. I'm going to just do this. So the theory of communists, this is where people had a problem. Maybe summed up in a single sentence, that you give up private property, that everyone gives up private property. Rich, poor, it all belongs to the state. We're going to divvy it all out. This was the theory. And everyone has the same. That way we get rid of poor people. That was the theory. So what if you think people said if you were the one that had the most stuff, if you were one of the people with the big bag, right? And then secondly, communism abolishes all eternal truths. It abolishes all religion. We don't have a need for religion. Religion makes you hypnotized. There was someone who named Karl Marx who said religion is the opiate or the drug of the people. You can control people that way. We don't need to do that. And the communists openly declare that their ends can be attained only by the forcible overthrow of all existing social conditions. Let the ruling class tremble at a communist revolution. The proletarians have nothing to lose but their chains. We have nothing to lose. We have a right to fight for our freedom. We have a right to win, right? It is our right to love and support one another. We have nothing to lose but our chains. Have you heard that before? So we have a world to win. Working men of all countries unite. The idea was that people on the bottom begin to gain some equality with those on the top. So this is what the summary of communism is. It favors the collective community ownership of property. Everyone has stuff in an equal amount. The government, acting for the people, makes economic decisions, and from each according to his capacity, each according to his needs. To whom much is given, much is expected. If you have more, you're expected to give more. And the communists seek to overthrow existing governments and revolutions. Okay, so that doesn't sound horrible, but where does it go really, really wrong? Why did Americans dislike it? Because they thought, here's an argument that you hear today, that communism discourages work and promotes laziness, that communism took away personal freedom and individuality, that communism was opposed to religion, and that USSR, former Soviet Union, was a brutal dictatorship, and people equated, and here's the problem, communism with dictatorship. So if we're giving everybody the same amount so no one is hungry, everybody's got food in the refrigerator, got a roof over their head, how does that make you lazy? Or does it make you more able to go out and do what you need to do for you and your own? Okay. Next, historical background, the Russian Revolution, the USSR, and post-war disagreement. Russia fought a civil war from 1918 to 1921. On one side were the communists, or the Red Russians, also called Bolsheviks. On the other side were the anti-communists, or the White Russians, which had nothing to do with race. A number of nations sent troops to aid the White Russians, including the United States. The communists won the war, however, and established a communist dictatorship that would last for 70 years. And so the Soviet Union, Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, was created in 1922. It consisted of Russia and eventually 4 large republics. It spanned 11 time zones and was the largest in the nation. Russia and the United States didn't have relations until 1933. After Lenin's death, Joseph Stalin took over, and he was a ruthless totalitarian, ruthless with power only to himself. And so the challenge after the war was how the United States, Russia, and Britain could lay a foundation for a stable and peaceful post-World War. What did the United States want? We wanted a democratic world sharing American values. We wanted a community of nations where we could openly trade with one another. Um, what did Russia want? They wanted security. They believed that the West was a threat to any communist nation, and he meant to create a buffer zone between him and the Western world to control and scoop up Western nations. That might have been a problem, right? So, in summary, and we're gonna dib and dab back into it. World War II alliance was between the United States and the USSR, and it should really be seen as a temporary arrangement to defeat a common enemy. That's what it was. Deep differences in politics, economics, and history divided the two nations, yes, and disagreement over what the post-war world would look like split the alliance into competing camps, which went on for 40 more years. That's it. And that's it. So that was a very good summary. We're going to talk more about this next week. Be well, everyone. Take care. Have a wonderful day.